In this episode, I test drive the 50-140 F2.8 lens from Fujifilm, use it for an entire photo shoot without losing my mind, and tell you at the end of this video whether it's still part of my collection. Let's get it started. Good morning and welcome back everyone. Here's another video for you, and before I get to that, two things. One, thank you so much for the support over the last few days, taking some time off and coming back, releasing these episodes at a much higher cadence than I usually do. Usually it's a weekly thing, not 3 episodes a week. But the support, the feedback, the comments, and really just you guys telling me that you're enjoying it, I absolutely appreciate all that. The second thing is, and I say this often before the videos, but again, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do consider subscribing to the channel. There's a ton of great stuff on the way. We're just getting started. So whether it's gear reviews, whether it's behind the scenes, whether it's editing and going into my process of creating an image, if you're into those kinds of things, please do subscribe. You're not gonna regret it. So enough of that. Let's talk about the 50-140 F2.8 lens from Fujifilm. This is one of Fuji's 3 red badge lenses, the others being the 16-55 f2.8 and the 8-16 f2.8. You can expect a focal length of equivalent would be 76 to 214 millimeters on an X-mount system. And as the name would suggest, it can maintain an aperture of f2.8 throughout that focal range. Inside this beast, you're gonna find 23 lens elements in 16 groups, and there's special coating and optics to remove chromatic aberrations, ghosting, and unnecessary flares. The lens also has a triple linear focusing motor, and what that basically boils down to is that you're gonna get super fast autofocus that's also very quiet. This lens also has optical image stabilization built in. It gives you about 5 stops of image stabilization. It's also weather and dust resistant and can operate as low as -10 degrees Celsius, though I'll be honest, I've used it in lower temperatures than that, being Canadian and all. And it weighs about a kilogram, just under a kilogram, so about 2.2 pounds for this lens. Rounding out Fuji's holy trinity of lenses, as they call it, this is one of the most premium zoom lenses that Fuji makes. It sports some of the latest in optics and lens technology, but it's also, honestly speaking, my least used lens in my collection. Why the hell is that? Well, let me talk about the lens first and what it can do. For this review specifically, I want to set out and do an entire photo shoot just with this lens. And optically speaking, it produced really stunning images. The sharpness of some of the images that I got using this lens, and specifically this one right here, it was mind-blowing, and it's something that I shouldn't be surprised by using a lot of Fuji lenses. But again, every now and then you'll run into some lenses that have a more narrow aperture range in which they produce their most sharp images. With the F2.8 50-140 lens, that range was much wider. Even at F2.8, I was still getting fantastic sharpness. And as you creep closer to 5.6, the sharpness was, well, it could cut your eyes. It was that good. In terms of the images that it was able to produce, I was not disappointed. So let me clarify this right now. This lens produces fantastic images. And for those of you that understand how to maneuver this thing are going to be rewarded in what you're able to produce. The focusing speed was nearly instantaneous, and the face and eye detection worked reliably. It's not something that had any hiccups or hunted unnecessarily. This is not something that I'm used to with, say, the 56-1.2, where it may hunt and I rely more on manual focusing. I found myself more comfortable to use autofocus in continuous mode with this 50-140 f2.8 lens. The zoom ring on this lens, it actually provided a good amount of resistance. It was really smooth. It provides, in my opinion, a little bit more resistance than some zoom lenses. I think that's more akin to it being a premium lens, and people like that about it. So you can get really granular and make those slight adjustments without worrying about it slipping or maybe moving under its own weight. So I really appreciated that aspect of this lens and its build quality. The optical image stabilization worked really well, especially in this photo shoot. Something that I left on and didn't worry about and didn't produce any results that I didn't want. That being said, for those of you that are going to use it for video, I'd probably turn this off and rely more on your stabilization outside of the lens. What I also appreciate about this lens is that aperture ring. It's very clicky, it stays in place, there's no give to it unless you want to turn it. And it's something that not all the Fuji lenses have. So for video work, it might not be the best option, but for photography, it's fantastic and it's reliable. And I never found myself accidentally knocking it out of place and into an aperture that I wasn't intending. It's not something I can say about all the Fuji lenses. So with all these good things and with all these great images, why am I so reluctant to love this lens or use it as often? It comes back to preference. At this quality, at this price, this is a premium product, and I will say you're just not going to be disappointed in what it can produce. In fact, the pricing, I'd venture to argue, is underpriced if you look at equivalent lenses on the market and what's available. And again, bring it back to the image that you can produce. Let's go back there. It's crazy that you can get this lens for the price that Fuji sells it at. However, that being said, with zoom lenses, this is going to be an incredibly preferential thing. Personally speaking, I just don't enjoy zoom lenses anymore. There's too much variability and that guesswork involved to get the composition. It's actually something that I don't enjoy with respect to my work. With this particular lens, I would argue that you never truly get a chance to master a focal length. You're really just hovering in this range, trying to create an image in the environment you find yourself in. And in dynamic environments, that's actually a benefit. If you're doing sports, events, and someone mentioned this in one of my comments of a previous video, if you have any kids that are into sports and they're inside of a gymnasium, I'll come back to this later, for that type of work, you want this variability and flexibility. But for more controlled environments, such as, studio work and portrait work, I don't know if you want this. When you compare the 50-140 for, again, portrait work, studio work, to some of the primes that fall in that 50-140 range, you sacrifice size, weight, portability, the ability to go to even lower f-stops, all for the flexibility to have a wider focal range. And for me personally, it's not a trade-off that I'm willing to make. However, there's a bunch of you watching that might disagree with me, and please, let me know if you do, because that's okay, we're allowed to disagree. It comes back to the type of work that you do and the type of content you want to produce. Now, if you're into sports, events, wildlife, especially with that teleconverter, and like that viewer mentioned in a previous video on my comments, a parent with kids that are in sports inside dimly lit gymnasiums, this is probably a must-have lens for you, if not on your wish list. And for those of you, I will tell you, if you're looking at the optical quality, as well as the build quality and the reliability, overall, this is a fantastic product. Don't get me wrong. Don't let my personal preference skew you away from this product. The images, again, that I was able to get with this lens are portfolio worthy in my opinion, for my own portfolio, and if you guys like them, let me know. I was really happy with what this lens could do. It didn't disappoint in any manner. The only thing that made me not enjoy the lens was the process in which I captured those images. Standing behind the subject and zooming in and zooming out and really overthinking that, it just takes a little bit time off of the overall experience for me. It's almost like being inundated and overwhelmed with choice. I'd much rather have something that's a little bit wider, a little bit more of a telephoto, and play between those two lenses, move with my feet, and compose and grab the image that I'm looking for. So that, for example, if I'm using a 56-1.2 to grab these portrait shots, I'm only doing that, I'm focusing on that, I'm composing for that, and that job is done. I can then move on to the next lens, maybe a 23mm, or maybe a 35mm, or maybe a 16, and then focus on that. being in that mindset to create the image that I'm looking for, and especially go after the images that I had pre-planned. And this comes back to your photography technique and styling, being able to visualize focal lengths and master focal lengths over time. I'm at a place where I can think in terms of 85 equivalent and 35 equivalent. With the 50-140, it wasn't developing those skills for me, and it was kind of tricky to go back and know if I was actually there. It was hard to think in those terms, and sometimes I would get confounding inputs, if that makes sense. Whether or not you should buy this lens will primarily come back to how you create images. If you like the process and flexibility of being able to scale and move that focal length, stay in one spot and compose that way, if you enjoy that process or don't mind that process, you will absolutely love this lens. It just produces such fantastic images. I'm gonna say it over and over again. However, for those of you that are in more controlled environments and would much prefer learning and mastering a specific focal length, if you want a little bit more portability, loss in weight, something that you can actually take with you more places than not, you might skew toward a prime lens somewhere in the range of 50-140, maybe the 90mm F2. And I will say, don't take what I say as gospel. I'm just here to share my experience and ideally give you more information, more anecdotes, more analogies, whatever it may be, that you guys can make an informed decision for yourself. I will say though, if you are serious about your craft and find yourself in more of that studio portrait environment, there may be a better benefit to your long-term growth in going with a prime solution as opposed to a zoom solution. So where do I land on this lens? Is it still part of my collection, even after all these great results? Do I have this as part of my kit? The answer is no. I actually sold the lens. I shot all this material ahead of time and found a buyer and sold this lens, and I'm gonna use that toward another lens. In my opinion, the 50-140 just provided too much variability for my taste, and I would say doesn't actively benefit my skills as a photographer, again, for what I do. And despite it being able to grab some remarkable images that really impressed me as well as a number of others, it just didn't leave me enjoying the process in which I captured those images. And if you've been watching this channel for a while, you know I care as much about the process to make an image as much as the image itself. Crazy for some, I know, but hey, let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate your time. Again, before you go, let me know what you think in the comments below. I read and respond to all of your comments. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. You will not be disappointed. Thank you again. My name's Gajan, and I'll see you next time.